homework time. Yes, happy homework time is here yet again. Let's start in the customary manner. Let's jot our name down at the top of the paper. I will write my name, and you write yours. And also, let's write today's date. I'll write today. You write the actual date. Don't write today. So each rectangle here represents 1. And so all of these are one whole, all right, and divided into fractions. And now all we're doing here, this is the same thing we've been doing for the past 2 lessons. We're just doing the inverse operation. So instead of decomposing using multiplication, we are going to compose using division. And for all my generation out there, this we called simplifying fractions. So if you're wondering what this is, we're simplifying fractions. So we're going to compose the shaded fractions into larger fractional units. Like in this first one, we'll look at it. We're going from 2/4 to 1/2. That's what they mean by larger fractional units, because here the fourths are smaller and the half is larger. All right. So express the equivalent fractions in a number sentence using division, such as we have here, which as you see is the same thing we were doing multiplication, just the inverse operation, division. The first one's been done for us there. So we started with 2/4, and we said, well, if we divide that by 2/2, which is equal to 1, so again, as I've said many times now, we're changing the form of the number, but not its value when we divide by 1, same as when we multiply by 1. And so we could see how this is 1/2. In fact, let's kind of like pull back the Panavision here and look, and you see B, C, and D, they're all equal to 1/2, aren't they? So all of these are going to be, some fraction is that fraction divided by something equals 1/2. All right. So what we're going to start with, I'm going to try using the rounded rectangle in red, as our happy little friends did there. And so I'm going to compose it. If you want to grab a colored pencil, then, oh, see, but it's got a fill, so I have to remove the fill. Okay, hold up, I can do this. There we go. All right, so there's one part of it, and there's the other part of it. Okay, so now, when we think about what I actually just did there, I started off with 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8. So I started off with 4/8. And I'm saying, well, that 4/8 is equal to, and we can set up the division in advance, just as we did with the multiplication, is 4/8 divided by something. And what's that going to leave us with? I prefer to kind of do this backwards. Instead of trying to figure out the factor, the divisionary factor here, I like to find the answer and then go back, and it makes it easier. So watch how this works. Well, we know it's half. I mean, we could just look at this and see it's 1/2, and that's what's helpful to us in this case. So we know we're going to end up with half, and now we can look at, well, 8 divided by what is 2? Ah, see how much easier that is now? So we're talking about a factor of 4, and so we will write 4/4, because that's equal to 1. We're changing the form, but not the value of the 4/8. It's the same amount of cake here. We're just cutting it or not cutting it differently. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 4/8 equals 1/2. All right, great. Now we'll be doing the same thing with these. So let me grab my rounded rectangle. Oh, I'll keep doing it in red. Now I regret doing that. All right, so here we have this one. And here. And we'll get into more complex ones, but let's just keep it simple for the time being, shall we? And make sure we're understanding the math. So we could see just by looking at this bad boy that it's equal to 1/2. So what did we start with? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 12. So we started with 6/12. And as we did on the last one, we could set up that long fraction bar division so we can easily kind of fill in the blanks. And we can see again just by looking at it without having to really do the math that half of this figure is shaded. So we know this is an equivalent of 1/2. In fact, remember we discovered this in an earlier lesson that, hey, if the numerator is half the denominator, you're looking at an equivalent of 1/2, like 50 hundredths. 6 is half of 12, right? So what's the factor here? Well, 12 divided by what is 2? There we are. It's 6, right? And we'll be writing 6/6. So its value is 1, changing the form, but not the value of the 6/12. Same amount of cake there. So 6/12, 6 divided by 6 is 1, 12 divided by 6 is 2. Everything checks out. Beautiful. Now this last one, we're just going to kind of breeze right on through. I'm not going to belabor it with explanations because I think you got it. Do you? Do you? Do you? Of course you do. If not, though, seriously, just like go back and watch that again. Isn't that the beauty of video? All right, so now let's see what we're looking at. So we started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 14. So we started with 7/14, and that's going to be equal to, well, let's set up the division we know we'll be doing. And we could tell just by looking at this beauty that it's 1/2. So what's the factor here? 14 divided by what is 2? 7, of course, right? And so we'll have a numerator of 7 as well, so divided by 7/7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, 14 divided by 7 is 2, 7/14 therefore equals 1/2. Rolling on. And as is their wont, our Eureka mathematicians are having us do the same thing now, but kind of pulling back some of the support we had. So I'm not going to bother changing color on all these, okay? So compose the shaded fractions into larger fractional units. Okay, so I'm going to draw here, okay? And now what's this? Well, let's look at it. We started with, let's kind of do both things at once. We started with 2 out of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So 2/12. Okay. And now let's set up the division we know we'll be doing so we can see things more clearly. All right, I'll even set the fraction bar over here. And now look, I have this circled, so let's call this 1 part out of, well, I know it's going to be a bit of a pain, but we can draw our rounded rectangles around each of these so we can clearly see how many parts we're dealing with here. Oh, that's a no! There we go. Bad rounded rectangle, bad! Okay. All right, so now what do we have here shaded? We have 1 part out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so what we're going to end up with here is 1/6. See, I still like to do these kind of backwards because now it's easy to see the factor. 12 divided by what is 6? 2, and of course we'll put a 2 in the numerator here as well so that the value is 1. We're changing the form and not the value of 2/12. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 12 divided by 2 is 6. Everything checks out, makes sense. Beauteous! Moving on. All right, so now here we can easily put a nice little rounded rectangle around that feller and do the same for the rest of them. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. I don't know why it doesn't leave the tool selected. I have to see if there's something in my settings. Talking to myself. All right, so now let's see what we have. We started out with what? 1, 2 out of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so we start off with 2/10. And notice, by the way, on the first page, all the numerators were 1 and all the values were 1/2 to kind of ease us into this. And now you can see on this, just at a glance, that all the numerators starting off will be 2 to take us the next little baby step forward. So let's go ahead and set up our division we know we'll be doing. All right. And now we can easily see that when we compose them, we're saying, okay, let's put these 2 together into a group. So that's 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 out of 5, 1/5. What is the factor, the relating factor between 10 and 5? 10 divided by 2 is 5. And of course, we'll do the same in the numerator there. If you had something different, like if you put 1 over 2 or something, that's not finding equivalence. And what we're doing here is equivalent fractions. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Everything checks out. Beautiful. Let's hit C here. So we can group these 2 together, compose. right? That's what we're doing. We're composing the fractions. Before we were drawing lines to decompose or partition them. And now we're drawing beautiful, happy, little rounded rectangles in order to compose them. Okay, so what did we start with? 2 out of 2, 4, 6, 8. So we started with 2/8. And let's set up the division we know we'll be doing. See how this is just the inverse of what we've been doing with multiplication in the last 2 lessons? And so now what do we have? We have one composed group out of 1, 2, 3, 4, which would indicate that 2/8 is equal to 1/4. What's our relating factor here? 8 divided by what is 4? 2, of course. And we do the same in the numerator. Double check ourselves. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Lovely. Let's look now at this one. At D, we can compose quite easily here on all of these. We point out we're putting 2's together. We're composing those. All right, and then what did we start with? We started with 2 out of 2, 4, 6. So we started with 2/6. And to find our fractional equivalent, to simplify, as your parents and I learned it, we can set up our division and then say, well, what do we have? We've composed this into a group of 1 part. So 1 out of 1, 2, 3. So that would say that 2/6 equals 1/3. What's our relating factor here? 6 divided by what is 3? 2, of course. And do the same in numerator. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And you notice something now, then this will help you as we go on. Notice these are all divided by 2 because we group 2 together. Whoa, math makes sense. Mystical. Rolling on. And an E and F here. We just have to answer some questions, just like in the good old days. So I copied what we did on number 2 up here so we can refer to it. So what happened is the question, to the size, back in the first part of number 2, of the fractional units when you compose the fraction. Okay, so when, answer in a complete statement here, when I composed the fraction, and by composing the fraction, what we simply mean, that's when we drew our little rounded rectangles there, when we grouped together those parts. When we compose the fraction, what happened to the size of the fractional units? Well, here, for example, we started with 12ths, and when we grouped them together, they became 6. So the fractional units actually grew larger. You see how a 6th here is larger than a 12th? In fact, it's twice as large. When I compose the fraction, the fractional units were twice as large. Okay. Groovy. Now what happened to the total number of units in the whole when you compose the fraction? So the total number of units, again, looking at this one or any of them, like here we started with 12 units and we went down to 6. So when I compose the fraction, I guess we can start with that same little opening. And don't skip this. Write a complete sentence. Make your teacher oh so happy. It's worth it. You're spreading happiness in the 10 seconds it takes you to write that. When I compose the fraction, the total number of units was smaller, right? So we started with 12 here, we went down to 6. We started with 10, we went down to 5. Started with 8, we went down to 4. We went from 6 to 3, and this one was smaller. And maybe we could even add in parentheses here, half in this case. Very good, and that's it for E and F. Let's cruise in here. Let's move on. Okay, here in number 3, we're actually doing not just the same thing, but actually the same exact thing we did back in number 1, but here we're doing it on our own. So in the first area model, we're going to show 4/8 here. And then the second area model will show, or model, 6/12. We'll draw that. Then we'll show how both fractions can be composed or renamed as the same unit fractions. Now, I'm glad I'm here to help you because there's an easier and a more difficult way to do this. So with 4/8, the best way to do this, watch here, is to, whoa, something just happened. Okay, is to draw the eighths like this. All right, and let me go ahead as I've done in the past, and I'm going to shade in 4/8. So it's actually not technically the same exact thing we did back in the one, but it's very similar. Okay, and now here doing 12ths, I'm going to want to draw 6 and then do that separating line. It's just easier that way. You could do it different ways. Okay, so I'm going to draw 5 lines to make 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1 across will give me 12s. You see? That's why I'm glad I'm here to help you. And now let's shade in 6 of those 12s. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Very good. So now to show how they can be composed or renamed as the same unit fraction, watch this. So, see, I can put all those together and then have an equal group like that. You see? So now it's how many groups? 2. And how many are shaded in? 1. So it's equal to 1/2. You got it. And look, same thing here. 2 groups of 6 parts, right? So they're equal. They have to be equal groups. You can't just draw rounded rectangles wherever you like. And they are, and so half of them are shaded in. So that makes the division quite easy, doesn't it? I'll write it up here. Express the equivalent fractions in number sentence using division. Well, what did we start with here? We started with 4/8, right? And we know we can set up that division. And we can see that we have 1 out of 2 groups. So what is our relating factor? 8 divided by what is 2? Yes, 4. And double check ourselves. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And same thing here. What did we start with? Yes, 6/12 is what we drew. It's just easier to see the way I drew, I think, than if you made 11 lines and had 12 side by side, which would be all squinchy. All right, and we'll set up our division. And we know, look, we have 1 out of 2 equal groups shaded in now, so we know our equivalent fraction is 1/2. We've also kind of cued into the fact that when your numerator is half your denominator, 4 is half of 8, 6 is half of 12, we can see that relationship. What's the relating factor between 12 and 2? 12 divided by what is 2? Yes, 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Number 3 is done. Let's go on to number 4, the last one. Homework time is almost done. Well, oh by gosh, by golly, we're doing the same exact thing here. Just, in fact, the first one is 4/8 again. And then the second model will show 8/16 and show how both can be composed or renamed, or in our elder parlance, simplified as the same unit fraction. And again, we'll do number sentence with division. So let's do it. We just drew 4/8, so we know what this looks like. No big mystery here. And again, I think it's easier to see what you're doing here if you do 4ths and then a horizontal line to compose 8ths. And here, we'll do both at once here. And now here, we're going to do the same thing. Actually, you know what we can do? Watch this. Watch this. Let's do 4ths. Oh, you see where I'm headed, huh? You see where I'm going with this. Let's do 4ths and then do 4ths the other way as well. So split it in half, then split each of the halves in half. That's an easier way to draw 16ths, right? Isn't it? Isn't it? Say it is. Say it is. Because it is. Not lying, yo. All right, so let's shade in 4 out of 8 here. And this is my scratchy way of doing it. And then 8 out of 16 here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we will, as the instructions say, show how they can be composed. switch to the red so you can see what I'm doing here with the rounded rectangle. So there, look, I can put those 4 together and these 4, and what are we looking at again? Yes, we're looking at half of it. You can tell just by glancing at it, right? I'm not going to pretend you don't see it. We all see it. Even your dog sees it. Tell your dog I said arf. Alright, so here we go. Now we just do the math out. And again, I'm not going to belabor this with explanations because we already did this. So here we're starting with 4/8. And we can set up that division. And we know, look, we have 1 out of 2 groups. So we know our equivalent is 1/2. 8 divided by what is 2? That's right, it's 4. Check ourselves. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. What do we start with here? 8/16. And we'll set up our division we know we need to do here. And what's our equivalent? Well, look, we have 1 out of 2 equal groups shaded in, so it's 1/2. What's our relating factor? 6 divided by what is 2? It's 8. So divide by 8/8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Everything checks out. You have done it! Complete another homework time, so I'll see you again next time. It is once again homework time.